All right, can we see that? I think you guys can see that. Coach B here. We are going to go over the 4 pillars, 1, 2, 3, 4, of auto regulation. Bear with me, please. I write like a caveman. And it's been a while since I've done a whiteboard anything. That's a T. We can just kind of, there we go. Little angled. But today's video, auto regulation, okay? So what we're going to talk about is auto regulation. The way that I define it is making intelligent and articulable changes to your program on a micro, meso, macro cycle type of a scheme, and allowing yourself to train day to day using this auto regulatory system. Okay, so I want this to be an open discussion type of a thing here, where I'm going to lay out what I think auto regulation means. The reason I wanted to do this video is that this is a very widely used training principle that is not well defined in general, in my opinion. So what we're going to do is we're going to lay out all 4 of these. First one, hard to see: injury, recovery, micro PC, micro cycle, or micro daily, weekly, monthly, right around in there, programming considerations, macro programming considerations. How does this choice or exercise selection fit into the overall plan for the meet, or for this half of the year, or this training cycle for the year, or even as big as this quadrennial Olympic lifting cycle, this 4-year period, okay? So we're going to start on the left. I kind of thought about these in order of importance. 1, 2, 3, 4. So these will kind of intermingle, micro and macro programming considerations, because by the time we work from here towards here, we should be from conceptualized auto regulation all the way into practical sets, reps, exercise selection. What the hell are we doing on this day, okay? So we are going to use an example to lay this out, because I feel like that is going to be the easiest way to get this concept across. We are going to say that we are dealing with a low back tweak, very common. So low back tweak, okay? So low back tweak is our injury. We'll say that we're in off-season / hypertrophy mode. Yeah, for most of us, there's not really an off-season, so we'll call it a hypertrophy phase, okay? And then, you know what I'll do is we're just going to include hypertrophy, transformation, and a peak. Okay? Just for shits and giggles, just so we can lay this out, okay? So hypertrophy, transformation, peak, meat would be there, okay? This is how we would start to work through this process. Okay, so we will talk about exercise, squat. Squat, the king of all lifts. I love it, my favorite. We are going to talk about how to auto-regulate a squat while having a low back tweak in each one of these phases using our system here, okay? So let's say it is hypertrophy season, okay? I got a low back tweak. And then I'm going to kind of lay this out on how to push this into every avenue with fatigue and all kinds of stress management, lack of sleep, whatever. You'll be able to use this everywhere, okay? So low back tweak, we are supposed to squat. I squat Monday, so I'll pretend it's Monday. It's hypertrophy season. When is that going to be, right? So we probably had a meet somewhere in the recent past. Okay? What is our goal for hypertrophy? We're talking about that. That's just kind of, let's build some volume, let's build some work capacity, okay? So now we get into our pillars. Injury. Do we have an injury? Yes, we laid that out. We have a low back tweak, okay? So we have to start to work our way from left to right down the pillars, okay? So we have things to consider. We have low back tweak right here. So that goes into injury, okay? Sorry, this is going to get a little weird. Recovery. What are the recovery needs for the later sessions in the week? What's my recovery like? What kind of recovery do I need? Do I have a very, very heavy bench press? Those of us in the gear have felt this a lot, where if we take a squat and we're really, really tight in our low back, and then we got a bench with a big old arch and a lot of leg drive, you could ruin your bench day by squatting or doing a variation that will cause you to have to go too heavy, something like a leverage advantage, right? So if you're a low bar squatter and all of a sudden you have Mars bar squats programmed in, for instance, you can overload that. That's probably going to be your best bar to load up heavy weights. Now, if you do that before you have a big bench day, that might not be the best idea. So you have to auto-regulate your way around that, okay? So low back tweak, we're trying to squat. Recovery. We are, let's say that real motivated off season, everything's good to go, right? So sleep's dialed in, just to eliminate some factors. Well, sleep's dialed in, nutrition's pretty good, stressors are good. All of the outside controllable factors are pretty well taken care of, and it's off season, so we know the workload is going to be relatively low intensity wise. So bar weight will be low because we have to do higher reps because it's a hypertrophy season here, okay? So we are taking a look at recovery, and we are taking that recovery into consideration. So then we move to our next one. Micro programming considerations. We already kind of touched on this a little bit. A lot of these pillars will intertwine as I'm showing you, but we already kind of talked about this. Micro programming considerations being, what is the goal of today's session? What is the goal of, where does this week fit into the overall block or mesocycle, how you can think of it as, right? So let's say I had something typical like a linear 3 sets of 8 reps in the squat, okay? So how we look at this is, when I'm squatting, how is this low back tweak going to affect my 3 sets of 8 in the squat? Am I going to complete that? Am I going to injure myself further? Am I going to kick the can down the road recovery-wise and then push all of this stuff into the next cycle, microcycle, the next training day, or the next even mesocycle, okay? So we're thinking about this. That would be a micro level programming consideration. So what we're thinking about here is, let's say we had safety squat bar squats programmed, okay? Very common in a lot of people's off-season program because they suck at that bar, so we do what we suck at. Bring your weak points up, okay? So let's say micro programming considerations, 3 sets of 8 on the squat. Back is tweaked, and let's say I know I suck at that SSB because it rounds me forward and then it causes me to tax my upper and my lower back. So in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, that's probably not the best choice for this day's workout. So what I'm going to do is, I have access to a belt squat in my gym. So what I'm thinking is, if I load up some good band tension on my belt squat, and I know the goal is hypertrophy, if I run some 10, 15, 20 rep style squats, I'm going to hit my goal using my programming considerations relative to what the goal is, right? So I'm going to hit my goal of hypertrophy, work capacity, high reps, building that base out, okay? So my first big movement in my auto regulations, I'm going to switch this from SSB squat. SSB squat is out. We are going to go with belt squats. Okay. Now, I could follow the same set and rep range, but I also take into consideration certain movements. I know 3 sets of 8 is pretty heavy on a belt squat. I would like to bump that to, like I said, a 10 to 15 rep range. So I'm going to also auto-regulate this to, let's call it 15, okay? So everything's always going back to, what is my goal? Hypertrophy, right? So is 3 sets of 15 going to give me some good hypertrophy? You bet your ass it will, okay? So we are using the belt because the belt pulls on your hips and it's going to decompress. I use that term lightly because there's going to be some chiropractic and science nerds in the comments going to be like, oh my God, you're grounded to the platform and it's not real decompression, whatever the fuck you want to call it, okay? It makes your low back feel better, okay? So, better than an SSB squat. So, we're going to auto-regulate to belt squat. I look at my macro programming considerations. Does this fit in with my mesocycle? What's after my SSB squat wave? So, let's say after SSB squat wave, I was going to wave into some Duffalo bar. Is this going to help me feed into that wave in case I don't clear my back injury and I have to run this for the remainder of the wave or maybe a couple of 3 weeks? Is it going to hinder me going back? When I do this, I say no. Reason being is if you've ever done high rep belt squats, especially with band tension, it smokes your quads. What does an SSB do? It is a interior load more so than a straight bar or like a Mars bar, right? So it is quad dominant and upper back, taxes the upper back, okay? So that tells us that we might want to throw in something extra with this, okay? So if we're trying to nail it on the head, let's say I want to really tax the same thing that the SSB would do. I could smoke my quads on the belt squat and add in some back rows. Kind of piecemeal together what would happen to you if you squatted with an SSB, okay? I'm not even going to write that down. That was just a little side thing. If you really, really want to get very, very specific, again, with it being a hypertrophy off season, I don't think you really need to get that specific. Build some work capacity, pump the legs up, go home and eat. So, micro programming considerations, macro programming considerations. Now, these can kind of be interchanged, flip-flopped. Once we go through the macro, the micro, bounce back and forth, make sure everything checks out. Then we do what we already did here is we start choosing exercise selection, sets, reps, okay? Those two are taken care of, okay? That is going, so now we've just decided on this, and we're good. That is a good auto-regulatory, audible and move that we just made, okay? So now we go, line there, okay? So let's say we're going to do the same thing, same parameters, transformation phase, okay? We'll use a typical linear model to lay this out just because it's easy to understand. So we would be focusing on transforming the strength that we built in our work capacity hypertrophy phase and teaching our body how to acclimate better to heavier weights and build some pure strength, okay? So the reps are going to start dropping down. We're going to start getting into 5s, okay? We'll call it 5s. Everybody will kind of transform differently. I've had guys that their transformation waves are 8s. Some guys are 3s. And then we do a bunch of singles leading into the peak. However you got to do it. Some guys peak with triples, whatever, okay? So let's lay out what we would do in a transformation using our pillars of auto-regulation. When we have the squat and we have a little bit of a low back tweak, okay? So as we transform, we are getting more specific, or we should be getting more specific. Reason being is we're getting closer to what would be meet day. Right down here, I'll write this down. Meet the fun stuff, okay? So, let's say we worked through our low back tweak and we're feeling good, okay? So, we are taking the injury into consideration. We did all of our diligences. We did our assessments, our checks. We did our hip mobility. We released our psoas. We did a bunch of reverse hypers. we started engaging the abs correctly, and all of a sudden, okay, low back tweak is out the window, okay? This is a thing of the past. We trained through it successfully using our auto regulation and our pillars. Now we're in transformation. We need to squat. We know that we had a former low back tweak, so we probably shouldn't jump into RPE 10, max effort, rep max 5s. So, considering our injury, we know that we can squat again, but we need to take it light. Recovery-wise, are we acclimated? First of all, are we recovered from the end of that last block, last session, whatever that is? This, because the intensity would be relatively low from something like a belt squat wave, I would say good to go. Recovery is good. We're also going to be transforming the bench and the deadlift at the same time. With this type of intensity on the squats, benches, and deadlifts, we don't seem to have a lot of recovery issues going from squats into benches, into deadlifts, subsequently on and forward. Okay, so injury, good. Recovery, good. We've considered both. Micro, macro, hybrid blend. Okay, so how are we going to think about this? We need 5. Okay, so we'll write down 5s. We know that we just came off of a low back tweak, so we need to keep the intensity relatively low to make sure we're good and start to acclimate to the 5. So we should probably progress that linear across the wave. So if our intensity has to be down by default of not wanting to fuck ourselves up again, and we know we need to run 5s, we should probably add some density to this workout in order to maintain our conditioning from the last cycle being hypertrophy, and in order to get a good workout sufficient to set us up for later in the block when, it should be this way, later in the block when we feel better and we can start pushing the 5s, okay? So let's say now we're doing micro and macro considerations, right? That's what we just laid out. So we start looking, all right, we need to do about, call it 6 sets of 5. Let's say we went from safety bar, we're transforming, we're getting more specific. Let's say we got a Duffalo bar on this one, okay? So we'll call it, so now we're starting to get into micro programming considerations. Duffalo bar, we're choosing exercise, we're choosing bars, we're choosing rep ranges. We're thinking, how does that rep range feed into the next wave being a peak, okay? 6x5 Duffalo bar. Okay? Now, knowing that we had the back tweak, we need to keep intensity down. I would say let's keep this at RPE 6 for week 1, 6/7, okay? 6/7. We will let you use your discretion there based on how the low back feels, okay? We want everything moving beautifully, good bar speed, good technique. We want you producing a lot of power, okay? So, transformation, we'd say that would be about week 1. Now, let's say week 1 we're good. We ended up looking back at our video. It looked like about a 6. It was really historically lightweight intensity-wise because we were worried about the back. Coming into week 2, we're feeling good. Feeling like iron, okay? Let's up the intensity. Let's drop the volume, right? So maybe we cut this in half and we'll go 3 by 5. Okay, Duffalo bar. Let's push the RPE up a little bit because we're feeling good. Let's go to an 8, okay? So, RPE 8. That looks like Chinese, but RPE 8, that's what that means, okay? So, these are how we're starting to use all of this stuff, right? So we already have our exercise selection, we have our volume, our sets, and our reps, and now we're using macro programming considerations on a micro scale so we can start to figure out how should we progress this, okay? So let's say right here, if we highlighted this, injury, gone, okay? So right here, all good, right here. Injury's done, now we're off to the races, okay? This would be considered our acclimation wave. Let's say, I don't know if you're running 3 or 4 week cycles, but maybe we add a little bit active increase. the next week. And then end of the wave, we do whatever here. End of the wave, we send a big 5 RM. Ends up being a PR. Boom. Okay. Right back on track. So, started off track, got back on track where it counts, came away with a good 5 RM because you're using your pillars of auto regulation correctly, okay? So, now we would roll it into the peak. So we know that everything is good to go. And then we look at injury, right? So now, this is where it gets cool because we can use all this stuff like a trail of breadcrumbs, okay? Injury, good, done. Recovery, this was where this might get a little weird, right? Because we have not been pushing the heavy intensities for that long. RP8 was good. I would say, let's call this, maybe we stepped it up. This would be RP9. So now we only have what we would call maybe 2 weeks here. Say this was a 4-week cycle. 1, 2, 3, 4. We only got 2 weeks here where we're really acclimating to the heavy weights, okay? So now recovery-wise, we might be feeling a little fatigued. Plus, we got all this work we've been doing through the transformation in the hypertrophy phase leading into this. This would be, if you think about it as like a little sub sector of this peak, we might be in what's called the fatigue accumulation, which some people use or they recognize in their training, which is basically where intensity and volume crisscross at the highest point that will be in your training cycle, okay? So, I would say coming off of this scenario, we might be a little detrained for heavy weights. Above this 5 RM, we'd be getting into maybe some RPE 8, 8.5, depending on how many Instagram followers you have. You lie about your RPE on there, whatever. We'll talk about that in a different video. Anyway, so recovery considerations. Let's say that we know we're feeling a little shaky. This was good. We hit a small PR for a 5 rep max, but it felt heavy, and we're good mentally, so we just grinded that shit out, okay? So we know that same type of thing we did here, we need to take into account that we are kind of detrained for the heavy ones, okay? So we start looking at our macro programming and micro programming considerations kind of webbed in there. So what I'm thinking here for me would be, all right, I need to get acclimated to the heavy ones, okay? So I need to do a decent amount of volume at a high RPE and a high intensity, okay? Decent amount of volume being 2 to 3 singles, okay? Or 2 to 3 sets of 3, okay? So if I know this feels heavy, probably jump into some singles here, or a single is going to feel way heavier. And then we take into consideration, this would fall somewhere in the micro-macro paradigm of the mental aspect, right? So if we know this was heavy, we still got a small PR, and then we want to load up something near max, and that's going to fuck you up in your head, and then you're like, oh no, I'm not as strong, and then that might ruin your cycle mentally, okay? So I would say I'm going to jump to some 3s. 3s, if we could get that to right. Okay, 3s. I'm going to run the RPE up high, but not high enough to really test the max, okay? So we'll call this 3s at 8.5/9, okay? Now, a triple at RPE 8.5 to 9, I would say optimally we'll probably end up getting like 2 sets there, okay? So, good. Micro versus macro programming considerations. Now, I'm looking at this like, okay, I didn't build a lot of work capacity with the heavy weights. So it's probably going to be a good idea to put something that will help me maintain or even possibly get a little bit of a build, or as much of a build and work capacity as you can out of the heavy weights, or what we would know as strength endurance on the heavy ones, okay? So what I'm going to do is, I know that this intensity is heavy, so I can't do like an 8x3 or anything like that. So I'm going to do a 2x3, and then we're going to put some back downs in. That way we can maintain what we built the last couple of cycles. We can build some strength endurance to help us hit that 3rd attempt, which is a huge thing that you guys might notice. You might be strong enough to hit the attempt, but are you conditioned enough? Do you have enough strength and endurance to do multiple attempts over 90%? So that's why we're doing this. So back down, I'll call it BD 2x3. Now, okay, so you can run that however you do it, okay? So sometimes we'll do an 8.5 or a 9 or an 8 or a 9, whatever the hell you're doing. Some people hate the 0.5s. I typically don't like them so much, but you might be that in tune, right? We do a back down. Maybe we do a back down at a 6, or maybe we take some poundage off the bar. I do this a lot with my guys. I say 8.5, 9, 2 triples, drop 30 off the bar, do 2 more triples. They got 4 sets total. Good amount of work. Getting close to the meat here, right? Let's say only got a handful of weeks, 4 to 6 weeks out, whatever that is. So now we need to start tapering this up. So we can start going, hey, this felt all right. I'm starting to feel good at these weights. So the next week I'm gonna jump this up. I'm gonna go 1 top set at a 9 point or a 9/9.5. This would be maybe heavy single near max, leaving 1 in the tank, okay? And then we're gonna do back down 2x3. Now we can start to look back. We could use something similar to this, or we could just stick with the weight that we use this week, knowing that that's going to be kind of right in our sweet spot, our power zone. I would say err on the side of caution and go right here, same weight as this, just transfer that weight right over, boom, boom, okay? Now we're starting to get into what would be our 2 weeks out, where we have to really, there is no choice. We got to hit some heavy singles, okay? So now, if we're in a beautiful, perfect world, this would be somewhere in the realm of a PR. What we like to do with a lot of our guys is we will take a 3-rep max. A real easy plan here is we take a 3-rep max, and this would be about 2 to 3 weeks out. And then whatever that is, that's where we open them, okay? So I would say this week here, we go 3 RM. Okay. Now this has done its job of increasing our intensity. We hit a 5-rep max here. We're feeling better and we're acclimating more injury-free. So we now have 1, 2, let's say 3, 4. This will be our 5th week, 100% back tweak free. So everything's flying. Let's say we come out with a nice big PR here. So 3-rep max triple. This ends up being our opener. Okay. Got a couple weeks left. We'll fit it into this little box. I'm terrible at spacing. So let's say hit that, maybe some downtime. Maybe if you're a big guy, maybe you might need to take your opener 2 weeks out so you can rest. Some of the smaller guys can take an opener a week out, but we already established your 3 RM is your opener. We take opener. Sorry about the writing. Opener. And then bingo. Deload. Deload. And then light at the end of the tunnel. Then we make it to our meet, okay? So this is a, what is that, 31 minutes? Oh man, that was a long time. Okay, so I kind of blended some stuff in because that's how I coach my people, and that's how we coach people here at Coaching Revolution at RPG with the Michigan Barbenders. Is I'm not painting myself into a corner using one philosophy. I'm using everything, okay? And this is kind of a hybrid mashup of what happens when we're training our peoples, right? So we use what they need, not what we believe is the best method possible, okay? So we had a little bit of linear periodization in there. We had changed some bars, had some fun, auto-regulated around an injury. Now you can use this system for any type of an injury, okay? As long as we're following our pillars. What's the injury? How serious is it, right? Should we be training through it at all? If we have a blown muscle belly, we should probably not train through that. We should rehab that and then train, okay? Stuff like that. Recovery. First of all, are you being a good athlete? Are we doing everything we can outside the gym to control the uncontrollables and eat right, hydrate right, manage stress the right way, and sleep? Okay, all that stuff. Micro programming considerations and macro programming considerations. I like them separate just for talking points. They kind of mix and match in. Who knows? Maybe another pillar would be mentally. I know that coming back for some injuries, there can be a mental side to it that will take into play some of your auto-regulatory needs. Okay, so maybe you tore your pec off, and then all of a sudden, the way that the RPEs are stacking up, the next week you might have to handle that same weight that tore your pec, and you're just not mentally ready to do it. You don't feel confident enough. Is it smart for you to put that weight in your program, fail miserably, possibly re-injure yourself because you're overthinking and tightening up weird stuff and losing your groove? Or is it better to auto-regulate out of that, come back and take it down when you know you can smash it? I would say use your auto-regulation. So let me know what you think about this video. This is a one-take thing, so I didn't rehearse this, nothing like this. I had the idea. I did my deload workout. We got a meet here tomorrow, so the gym is empty. Cleaned the office, and then we made this for you. So let me know in the comments. We can start to add pillars. We can start to expand pillars. We can do some renovations to our auto-regulatory temple here, and we can start to have a good conversation that's going to lead us to a good, solid definition, a concept of how to make intelligent and articulable programming decisions on the micro, macro, and micro, meso, and macro, I think, cycles, and hopefully get you guys some PRs. Thanks for listening and watching. Coach B out.